Ghost in the machine. Does it work again? Yeah, okay. So I've been using Plone since 2002, 2003. I can't really remember anymore. This PloneConf, I realized when arriving here, it's my 20-year anniversary. The first PloneConf I ever visited was in 2004. Together with some other people here that are also from build year 76, like my colleague Maurits. So yes, we have a lot of experience with Volto, but we're not senior front-enders. And this project, like I said, was still under the label of Zest, but we kind of work together for different clients, different projects. So what I'm going to present now is not yet kind of the curse of knowledge that you have when you have great colleagues that know everything about them, but still I had a lot of support already from Kit Concept and also from the community at large doing this project. So why this project? Because we have this new front end now, and many things are the same, but also many things are different. And I found out throughout the year that the devil is really in many, many details. I've had many interesting discussions in the past already about generic Plone CMS information architecture, especially about content types and subtypes, and if you should create many content types or just a few and then vary it. So it's my thing. I've talked with people. So why this talk? Volto information architecture in Plone is really different now. When you come from Classic and you go to Volto, you have this curse of knowledge. The more you know, the more kind of you put yourself sometimes in a corner. Like I said, this is the last time for me also to have an outsider perspective. While I'm moving my employment now to one of the Volto incubators, Kit Concept. So after that, I will be spoiled with projects, with having colleagues with much more front-end experience. So maybe also for them and me to look back like, okay, this is how I was looking at Volto when I was at another integrator and trying to grasp all these things that are in there. So I'll show you a bit of my analysis and pitfalls, and I'll also add some Brazil promotion because we traveled Brazil before the conference in 2.5 weeks. Everybody advised me not to do it, but I got a compliment from Maurits that I didn't contact him for 2 weeks. So, because I will run out of time, as usual, I will first do the central thesis and summary. And this came to me somewhere this night when I was sleeping, so I changed my talk this morning to add this. We really need to rethink and upgrade, extend our basic content type block system that we now have finalized in Plone 6 Volto, but for Plone 7 and beyond. We need to experiment and add more native primitives to support a much better out-of-the-box experience. We already have some enablers. We have photo lighting. Also to do this and to experiment this year, we have Plone distribution now, with which we can create like customized setups of Plone that are still that still look and feel like an out-of-the-box installation. Because I've noticed in my project, Python, we say we have batteries included, and you really notice that if you look at the JavaScript ecosystem where you have to install hundreds of extra modules, and with Python you already have so much in the standard library. I really feel that with all the things we have now, we should and can do better, and we should add more batteries included. Not in core Plone, because then Maurits will get to me, Victor will get to me, and Timo will get to me. But Erica will applaud this because we have distributions now. We can do this stuff. We can showcase more complete, already out-of-the-box setups for larger setups, and there's already a lot of work underway in the community, but it still has to be finalized. Because I'm working with Maurits. Like I said, we should start a Plone 76 club. We have like combined 45 years plus of experience. Yeah, 23 years. Yeah. But we were still mediocre front-enders at most. We had 2 external front-enders in this project who are new to Volto, but had very good React experience. And still we had so many surprises. So if we had so many challenges with 45 plus years of Plone experience, can you imagine what a new integrator or a new front-ender coming into the community, what they have to overcome when they, at an institution, a large institution, they want to build a larger informational portal, and they start to experiment with content types, with relations, with dexterity stuff. That's only the back end. And then they see Volto with all the options on the front end. Good news. We have almost all the building blocks already. We have the distributions now. We had the most secure CMS. We have now the composite page editor. We have dexterity behaviors. We have containerization solved. We have examples now to have a generalized theme with better integrated blocks like Volto Light theme, but there are other themes as well that we now support. So I think a lot of stuff has already been done, which I think is a big applause. If you look at the last 2-3 years, what has happened in the Plone community, before finally getting through COVID and getting through the Plone 6 release, and now what has been done already to improve a lot of things, we are already way on our way to make something really beautiful. But still, to do. This is what I'm going to talk in the end also. I really think we should have a generalized and connected front-end and back-end configuration. Because now you configure a lot of stuff in the back-end, you configure a lot of stuff in the front-end, in the index config TS, in add-ons that also add to the config TS, but they're two worlds. And what I realized is that if you put the information architecture in between and you start to analyze what the customer wants, what you want to show visitors and how they navigate through the site, then those two configuration worlds actually have a lot of parallels and are interconnected. And that's, I think, maybe a technical depth that we don't realize yet, but you do realize if you not yet have the curse of knowledge of having done some great projects, because then you just copy and paste and you copy and paste. But if you look at it from a distance, then it's really like, So that's what I'm about to show you today. Like I said, we have some stuff to do. Dev containers. The block model is a huge overhaul that will improve many things. Talk to Victor. We have quite a bit of technical depth. I think what we see in speed of JavaScript communities and JavaScript programming language and Plone Python programming languages, the technical depth we've built in 20 years in Python Plone, we have the same technical depth in 5 years of a front-end JavaScript framework. So I will slow down my talking a bit. Next things, so much work already underway for documentation, for training, but like I said, we showed our external front-enders the documentation. I pointed them to the things, but still it's a challenge. So what about this project? End of 2023, we started an upgrade, improve project for the Flemish Environment Agency's main website. They're like the little brother or sister of another much larger, well-known European agency, the European Environment Agency. So what you've seen maybe in previous talks, previous years about environmental things in Europe and what the European Environment Agency does, Flemish Environment Agency does that for a large part of Belgium. Back then, we had also a rebuild and upgrade of the site from Plone 3-ish to Plone 4. We had also an external communication agency, which did all kind of the design and the first communication with the communication department. And they came up with 20+ content types and the kind of Drupal functional analysis. So we started to analyze that, and after a month we had so many inconsistencies in the functional design that we say, okay, let's just do the let's start approach, and you can do this with Plone. So what we did, we say, look, we will just gradually add more functionality, add more content types, add more configuration, and then when you have the basics in there, you can start extending the content types. Why can you do this? Because we have this object database and we have this programming language which containerizes all the concepts on the programming and implementation level. So you can, I gave this example many times. If you want to have a blog somewhere, you can put a blog in the content tree. You can just move it around everywhere. It will still keep functioning. That was then still something that many CMSs didn't do. They just had a route to where the blog was, and that was fixed, and there the functionality was hooked. With Plone, you can move all the content around, but because it's hooked onto Python classes, it's really flexible. And we had composite pages with collective cover, and it was so strange 2 weeks ago to walk on Avenue Paulista in São Paulo, and Erico Andrei pointing out, that's the simplest office. And Maurits, do you remember that we were in this project like, okay, we need a composite page. Okay, this collective cover stuff. Yeah, that's coming from some company in Sao Paulo, Simplus. Will they still support it? Should we use it? And 10 years later, you walk in Sao Paulo and you see the office, and Erico is one of your best friends in the community and your colleague. Really strange. So this was the old site. It's still online. This project will go live tomorrow morning. Not the greatest timing. Luckily, for some pure consensus or some deity, I have no talks tomorrow, but I have again 2 talks on Friday. So I can get up at 5 and we'll be fine. And I will show you now everything if I have enough time. So if anything happens, then you are accomplice. This is the new design. These are only the first pages. Let's see if I can do an escape here and go to here and zoom a bit around. So this is the design that the design agency, and it's really beautiful. It's really beautiful, but it's also huge. But then if you know Volto, you know you have a blocks layout. It's possible. There's a difference between it's possible and we can do it within a certain budget and a certain amount of time. So some zooming here. I'll get back to all this thing. So you see, navigation portlets. Didn't we say with Volto that we didn't do that again? We have headers and we have lots of listy things here. Lots of listy things. It's one big listy site until you come to the detail content. This is a search block, and it all looks similar, but a little bit different. So, where to start? Well, you start by going to Brazil and have a vacation for 2.5 weeks. So I'll do some Brazil promotion now. This is the KLM lunch and dinner we had. We arrived in São Paulo Friday evening, and we had a tour by Erico of the area there and Avenue Paulista. And what do you guys in Brazil have with Christmas? It's November 8th. It's November 9th. We don't do this in the Netherlands. We have some kind of Santa Claus that still comes for the children at December 5th, and only December 6th we are kind of allowed to start doing Christmas decorations. You start early November, and you don't clean up until January 15th, we found out in Lisbon. But we love the atmosphere. It's just a bit too warm, and it's a bit too summer, so it messes up my Christmas feeling, but brilliant. Oh yes, and of course the cocktails. I was never a cocktail fan. iPhone AI messes up. It was not really this radioactive, but they were cool. So versions used in this project: Plone 6 backend, Volto 18 alphas. Why not? If your colleagues are from Concept and you can ask them anything, anytime, and they get really frustrated if you find one exception to the other. But they helped us a lot. Volto Lighting 5 we used, but one thing, we were not able to use the cookie cutter template. We still use the cookie cutter plan template and not what you showed yesterday at Erico's presentation with Cookie Plone. If you start some project now, use Cookie Plone. We will do the cookie cutter template replaced by Cookie Plone scaffolding very shortly. If you want to know why, check Victor's talks. So, already 40 minutes. Project 10 years later, still the same things. We had a separate communication design agency, did all the upfront work. That was challenging in 2014. Similar experience now. Great visual designs, communication strategy, very good. But the consistency in information architecture became again the responsibility of the implementation team. And then everything is questioned again. And also the customer was maybe spoiled with a very nice Plone 4 site, so it was really managing expectations here. First, I want to do very quickly some generic information architecture themes and challenges, because in Volto, we now have composite pages built in. It's not an add-on like we had collective cover, mosaic, collective panels. What didn't we have in the last 20 years? What happens also is that the kind of conceptual and for an editor where he goes into the site, the difference between a landing page and a detail page is now gone. Maybe that's very good, but it also we notice it kind of messes up with the expectations of editors. We don't have collections or the distinction between folders and pages anymore. We have a folders page, and we don't have any more default pages, which you actually, I found out the hard way, or actually, you don't need them anymore. So, like I said, everything is a block. Focus on blocks. The editors sometimes don't see the forest for the trees anymore, because they're with blocks all the times. You have things like, okay, where should I store my media now? Can I store it inside a content item? Because everything is a folderish page. Yes, you can after you've saved it for the first time, because as long as you haven't saved the page, the folderish page hasn't been created, so you cannot store images inside your item. Should you maybe store it in a block, the images? We've had that experience with Plone 5 sites and mosaic and persistent tiles. Don't. So then you can store them on the context in the field. That's also very nice, but then you have the issue with blob images and blob files. Then whenever you duplicate a news item, that image is still there. So you would like to have reference, do everything by reference by now. That's what conclusion I've come to. Use the basic content types, file and image. Those are stored only once, and use a reference. And actually, this is already in Plone Volto, but it's not activated by default. And this is something we should really discuss for Plone 6.2 or towards Plone 7. Make this the default, move away from blob images and blob fields, because they suck with migration. They are horrible because you duplicate the content, getting them from the back end to the front end, caching. Brazil is big. Brazil is so big. I realized when we went from São Paulo to our first location in Foz do Iguaçu, we were kind of flying to northern middle Italy. That's like checking Europe. And I was like, okay, that's our normal vacation, then we're done and we go back after 2 weeks. This was the second of in total 11 flights we're going to make in these 3.5 weeks. So talking about images, you have this content images, but you have, I saw at least in our project, we have kind of metadata images. It's a lead image that you use if you want to refer to the content item in all kinds of listy things. And in many designs, and also these, we have a header image on top, which you might also want to reuse. But they have different purposes, they have different aspect ratios. The editors will then have to upload separate ones. And now with the blocks, you can also just add a header image block. And then it's by reference again. Maurits and me experimented a lot already with focal points, automatic focal points in other projects. You could say, okay, let's use automatic or manual focal points and reuse one image on the context for all these kinds of things. But from an editor part, most sites don't have these kind of high quality images where you can have a large square image and use a focal point to zoom in and cut out both portraits, landscape, or square images. So things there. What we did in this project, we added 2 images on most content items, a normal image and a header image, and then we reused them. Then, very important with Volto, check about every talk Timo did in recent years about Volto and art direction, limit the aspect ratios and sizes. Most design agencies will do this. That was one of the inconsistencies we found out in the design of this. They had many different aspect ratios kind of spread on the designs, but for a pleasing content, you really need only a few. The image placement and responsiveness is now in Volto moved out of the tiny MCE main area. It's now kind of handled implicit in the block system. You just say an image block, you move it to the left, you move it to the right, and you say you have 2 or 3 sizes, and that's it. And that already brings you so much in a much more pleasing and simple and aesthetically pleasing site. If you limit your editors now to this kind of system. There's this big Volto pattern I was already talking a bit about. You have this setup where you say, look, if you don't, you should maybe not store your data anymore on fields, or even worse, in the blocks themselves as persistent data. Use this pattern of, okay, we have media data in data content types, and you expose the presentation of them in blocks. In default Plone 6 Volto, we now have this: the image file content type, image block. Audio video is kind of the file content type, so you can create a video block. And the blocks kind of push them through on the visual layout. And third-party add-ons also do this. We have, like, seen in project the content type, content block, location content type, map block, publication content type in this site, publication block. We have a graph content type and a graph block. But if you think about this, then we are missing something now in the default setup. Where did our collection content type go? And I forgot one. There's another one that's also missing. If you look, see, hey, this is kind of the pattern that works in most cases most efficiently. And you make the matrix, we are missing a few now. So for example, in this project, we have a graph content type and we have a graph block. This is high charts with some configuration, and you just put a reference if you want to add multiple graphs on your website. They're beautiful, interactive, responsive, everything just works. Actually, our content editors can upload an Excel file, and it automatically, with some rules on the spreadsheet, we can generate out of the box. This will show up. So we went to Foz do Iguaçu, one of the largest electrical dams in the world, the second largest. There's one a bit larger in China, but this is, I think, the most efficient one. You go by bus, you go above the dam, below the dam, and it's awe-inspiring. It's really, really, really big. But can we generalize this data content type and presenting it somewhere type? Because we have the teaser block. So to speak with Lord of the Rings, one block to rule them all. And what you can do is you can do automatic adaptations to the referenced content type and just say, okay, the default variation of my teaser block will adapt to anything that comes in on the reference. The only problem there is if you start to look at the design, then you will start to see exceptions, and then you start to create variations and more variations. And if you don't watch out, it will be set up and configuring again for the content editors. So we have this unified blocks layout now, one editing interface for communication purposes. But then, like I said, the editors start to lose their sense a bit, like what's the home landing page? Then you have subsection pages, like the first branches on the tree. And then finally, if a visitor moves through the site and tries to find the content on the information they're looking for, they hit a detailed content and long read page. We did that in Plone 4 with covers for the landing and the section pages, and we had normal documents and a specialized CT for detail pages. Left, you see a cover. On the right, you see a detail page. Spot the difference. Left is using side and under portlets. The left is using collective cover. So the advantage of having detail pages is that the editors are focused on bringing in the content, and they can't mess with the layout. And that's a kind of freedom versus micromanagement. Or you have some editors I noticed in my career that obsessively want to tune their layout and change everything, and that's not why we delivered a CMS for them. So Volto has this unified UI for landing, section pages, and long reads now. But editors lose their sense, and they start to think, oh, but if I have all this flexibility on my landing page, why can't I do that same on my long read page? I mean, you showed it, it's possible. In the past, we could say to them, sorry, can't do, that's the cover, and this is a detailed page. Please concentrate on your content, and don't start messing with colors and alignment and whatever. So it's a double-edged sword. With this great power comes more responsibility, but also expectations. And a little block secret, you can still do full Plone Classic setup in Volto and ignore the whole blocks editor. You can just create view templates and ignore the whole blocks layout. But that's not what we want. But I remember a community Plone discussion from 2 years ago where we had this discussion. So, bird park, Parque des Aves, in also Foz do Iguaçu. I love birds. So, templates to the rescue. And that's something we don't really have yet. We have only one template set up now that actually works in Volto, which is the initial blocks template. You can have fixed and mandatory blocks. We have another feature which was implemented, I think, by ODF for EA, where you can store in the backend different templates. But me and then, of course, Maurits found out later when I asked him what's going on, it does not work. There are some edge cases there. So we have no list of templates yet easily out of the box to select Also Jan Mevers did a talk about this year at the Plone Tagung. We should really have multiple templates. This is the initial blocks configuration you could add in your configuration. And this was one of my unknown unknowns. We messed around with the first solution, and then Victor said to me, "Why? You have the initial blocks." Aha, okay, thank you. So you have this problem now when you start looking at information architecture. Either you do many content types and you have one fixed template, also in Volto now, if you don't try one of those add-ons, or you have a generic folderish page and you can add many templates to them and say, look, this is a page, but on this page is maybe semantically something about legal stuff, or what can you do to protect the environment, or something else. So that's this why multiple content types. If you can also add one metadata label to your page content type and say, look, this page is about this communication concept, but for the rest, it's the blocks layout, and you're totally flexible. So we had this two-dimensional matrix in 2014. It's, if you check it out, it's collective classifiers. We say, okay, we label a generic page content type with a semantic thing, a category, and you also have the domain knowledge of the organization, which in this case was an environmental organization, so you get a thematic access. And then what you can do, or actually in the product 24, we got a kind of third axis now, so it becomes a kind of a cube with the target audience. So what you can do, list me all the tips and tricks for civilians about conservation of water. That's a three-dimensional query, and then it will show you this in a listing block on a page somewhere in the site. You can also say, okay, I want to list all subsets under the main theme water for the category landing pages, because I can just have the generic page, make it a landing page, label it with you are now a landing page and you are not a long read, and you can do these queries. In this project, we kind of moved away the category and we called it a subtype now. The challenge here was that the design agency came up with 10 to 15 different page types maybe for another CMS implementation, and I kind of mixed them up because actually there was this semantic labeling of I'm a project, I'm a tip and trick, I'm something about legal, this is something about our organization. But also hooked on those things were like 3 visual subtypes. We had in the whole blocks layout, we had a 12-column width, we had the 8-column width with some navigation, or we had a centered 8-column width for news items. So I copied it first from the agency, and I still don't know if it's a bad idea or not. Cataratas in Foz do Iguaçu. It's almost 3 kilometers wide, if I'm not mistaken, and it's really, really impressive. So for you, let's split out the layout levels, variations, and conceptually in 3. You have this whole vertical page layout, like the blocks layout is how wide it is and what you show maybe on the left and the right. Then on the second kind of conceptual layout, you have the row levels where you can play with grid teasers, listings, search blocks, and you have some responsiveness. And then on the block level, you have the variants of the cards and the box where you can change some stuff. So let's see some row level variants. And this is like the trickiest thing that we had here, that we have this huge duplication of a visual presentation. On the left, you have a grid teaser. On the right, you have a listing block. They look the same with some variants. I now picked some others to show the difference. Right are showing some facts, left are showing some news items or projects, I think. But you have this whole duplication of, okay, I want to, as an editor, I want to pick 3 items and put them here, or I want to do a canned search and I want to show some stuff. But the whole rendering in the end, in the cards, is the same. And luckily, you can do this with Volto because we have the component registry. Use the component registry, register for each content type, the card, how it should look, and all your different views, you pull out the components dynamically for, oh, I'm now having to show effect. I now have to show a project. Call the project component and list it there. And then you have only one place where you have all the design. But of course, we try to figure out the grand design here, as we always did in previous projects. And at first we were totally flabbergasted when we saw this. Like, there's no system. And then somebody said, yes, but there is a system. Every content type has its own visual representation. Effect always looks like this. A surface always looks like this, but without the white background. So like, okay, then we'll implement that. And then next bullet point, after a while in the implementation, all the exceptions appear. Yeah, but on this page, we still want to have it a little bit different. On this page, nowhere, we're never going to mix different content types in a grid teaser combination or a listing, except on these 10 pages. And also again, the customer was spoiled with 10 plus years already of Plone power and flexibility. With the blocks layout, we said you can do even more. And so the options simply exploded. So we felt like this. Where's my audio? There's a lot of audio here. This is the Brazilian side. An Argentinian asked me yesterday, I shall not name who, maybe we don't have that many Argentinians, which side do you like better? And I said, I like the Brazilian side better because then you see the Argentinian side. But this is totally on the left of those 2.5, 3 kilometers waterfall. And you can walk in front of them. It's really, really, really impressive. Skipping that one. So to the rescue, our default variant. So on all the cards, on all the grid the teaser block and the listing, we say we have a default variant. The default variant adapts to the content type, and if you want to override it, then you pick a variant. But otherwise, leave it to the default variant because that's what the design agency did. But we already found out future ID. I'd like to have this same variant maybe also on the row level or on the page level, where you could say, okay, but if you list a project content type on this page, by default, switch it to another variant. Because now, if you have a grid teaser setup where you have 6 teaser blocks and you want to have switched the variant, you need to switch it on all the 6 of them, which is rather annoying. Anyone acquisition? This sounds like a really useful concept. So then the hardest things in IT is consistently naming things. And if you start working with variants in your Volto site, do a reverse and another one and optimize this. Because before you know it, you have like 10 variants with inconsistent naming and your editors are totally confused when they have to start using the site. We had something where we started, look, we have like a grid and a listy thing in the visual. So we have a default grid, default listing. Then we have a basic thing that shows a bit less. And we have a minimal that's only like a title and the description and the border. And then, of course, you have those, what is said, teaser variant overrides that you can also add. This was a fazenda we went to in close to Miranda. We did some night safari. We saw an ocelot. So, and then the challenge, of course, comes with the exceptions because people start to mix different content items in grid teaser or in listing tiles. And then you have to set the teaser block for a variant. So this is really like also a challenge here. What I said, maybe we should inherit the child teaser variants from a kind of label above. The other thing that we haven't quite solved in core Volto setup is, speaking of a field to override inherit card rendering, is the responsiveness. In this design, you will often see, also on desktop layout, 2 cards next to each other, 3 cards next to each other, 4 cards next to each other. Actually, that's very easy because we now have this design where we say, on all our listing and grid blocks, we have this extra option in Dutch, raster overloop, and there you can just set it for the desktop size. If you would like to have a tablet size in between, you could just add an extra field, and this automatically, thankfully for container queries, we also have now, and then it kind of solves the problem. The biggest problem we had was the search block, where you have a kind of a listing block, but with extra options. And the problem is that the basic thing is, for example, Volto site, I want to have a facet on all the content types, but I only want to show a page, a news item, and the project. And this is something that does not work out of the box. There was a workaround. You add the subsite to the base collection criteria. And as we found out the hard way, and also some friends here in the community yesterday, they had also in their projects, there's a real performance issue here, and it doesn't really work. What you can do is like this. You just add it to the base criteria. You say, I have a subtype. Select only these 5 subtypes from out of the 10, and then it works. But as soon as you start to view it, for example, they're all activated. Thank you, Mikael. Thank you, Franco, Alok, Alin, and sorry, I forgot your name again. Ru. They looked at it yesterday, and Mikko came up with a brilliant solution. You can create extra collection criteria. So I have now a subtype for my facts. I have a subtype for my services. I don't need to do this hack anymore. And now it kind of cleanly works. Did I already say the site goes live tomorrow? Again, of agenda. This country is huge. Oh, and there's Mr. Van der Valk. But they call it in the rest of the world the Toucan. So then we had another issue here, visual tags. Normally you say you have the keyword, the subject index, but in this design, they put in the design all kinds of random text that came from different fields. We first did it through an indexer. We also had a problem that we had a hierarchy on the theme field, where it doesn't make sense to have a water, drinking water, or a water pollution, because you know that it's about water anyway. So we created first a meta indexer, then we found out that's cool, but then you don't have these fields on the details, on the detail view, you only have it in the listy views. So in the end, here you see an example, for example, those labels are coming from different fields all the time. Then the biggest snack we had, we have this requirement. Sometimes the headers had these really exceptional views here. So we wanted to only, for example, for a service, have this Bel Air app, blocky thing. And you say, okay, block variation. But then as soon as you try to do this in the content type view and you go to edit, all those blocks disappear because the blocks layout is, you have only one generic blocks edit layout. So we kind of redid it again. We made all kind of separate blocks, and we used what I just showed, the initial blocks layout, and we say, okay, for this content type, please add these 3 blocks on top, fixate them. As soon as an editor goes to the edit view, they're still there, but he cannot touch them. Another example is like this, if you want to still have the side portlets. So solution, extra blocks, initial blocks layout with fixed items. We had a text social link block, for example, that shows everywhere. The only disadvantage is that now that you've fixated everything, the description is no longer editable because it's fixed, so you cannot do a custom description on the page. This is, for example, the text social block. And then the last thing we had was like this. Like, okay, we have a blocks layout. I showed you subtype, a subtype for limit the blocks layout to 8 or limit it to the right with a navigation. And then in the design at the end, they broke out again to the 12 blocks. I can't put this in a blocks layout. And then fortunately, we found out these are all related items, so I can just make a kind of, at the bottom of the default template, make a kind of rendering for all related items. If they add these 4 items to a related item to a content type, I can escape because I'm outside of the blocks layout. So, Fred's mind. This is what I figured out. I've been living in those lower 2 things all the time. Information architecture concepts, the basic storage, Zope, Plone, what we all had for 20+ years, a lot of config, and on top there were only some templates. Then Volto came 5 years ago, and now I have all my information architecture concepts, and I have this huge visual Volto setup again, and there's config between both of them, and they're not really connected. Because as soon as you wanted to show some context data in a block, then it needs to be stored on the context, or it has to be stored in the block itself as data, but then you cannot really reach it from the Plone backend because kind of blocks, schemas, and data is in JSON, and we are improving this. So a wild idea. We have this disconnected config between front-end and backend with information architect concepts in between. We have blocks flexibility, but we're missing core multiple templates and the other things. In the backend, we have content types, content type behaviors, but we also already have instance behaviors. So why don't we connect the front-end blocks with the back-end instance or class behaviors and say, look, then you no longer have an explosion of content types. Well, you can do, of course, as an integrator. You can have this huge matrix where you say, as an integrator, connect this front-end templates to a back-end generalized content type, but with these class behaviors activated, only allow a block to be shown if the class behavior or the instance behavior is activated, and then transparently transport the backend context data to the front-end list cards and detail pages where you need them. "40 minutes. I made it. Thank you so much. and I didn't have any more time. Oh, but please add a distribution to your core setup for your front-enders. We have distributions now. You can just add them to your project. A front-ender who doesn't have to install the back-end, it just it downloads the recent container image from your container registry. It starts it up. It activates the distribution, and there's a full set of examples and things in there. And one of Maurits or me maintain the distribution for the next test cases. Works really well, but we should actually have dev containers. Thanks.
Guys, we have some time for some quick questions, if someone. No? Then thank you.
If you have any questions during the conf, ask me.
The next presentation is about the interlicense program. It will start in some 5 minutes. Have some time for break.
Thank you.
We were maybe sorry. So we need a unified